A new phase of the war began. At 11:47 p.m. on November 18, 2025. The night sky over western Ukraine turned a searing white. It was Moscow's winter offensive, a massive aerial assault designed to cripple the country before the cold set in. From bases in Kursk, Smolensk, and occupied Crimea, waves of drones rose into the dark, and missiles followed. It was aimed at morale and infrastructure. The first siren cut through the freezing streets of Ternopil, followed by a second, then a third. Ukraine's air defenses sprang into action. They intercepted nearly 80%, but volume is a weapon in itself. The order was given at 5:20 a.m. on November 19th, from a hardened command bunker 40 meters beneath Kiev. President Volodymyr Zelensky stood with top generals and UAV engineers. The devastation filled the walls around them. Activate Operation Basilfall. This would not be symmetrical, precise, psychological, brutally effective. First, 50 long-range FPV attack drones. Each carried a 40-pound fragmentation warhead. Each could travel over 800 kilometers. They were the tip of the spear, low and fast, to blind radars. Second, 2 MiG-29 spiral variants near Vinnytsia, stealth polymers, infrared dampers, digital camouflage, and 87% signature cut, armed with R-77s and KH-31Ps, aimed at the NDCC, the war brain of Moscow. The first wave began its silent approach at 5:31 a.m. This wasn't a brute force assault. It was surgical, designed to exploit the fundamental weaknesses of a layered yet aging air defense network. The drone's flight path was meticulously planned, using the harsh winter terrain as an accomplice to their stealth. Over Bryansk Oblast, 50 FPVs, acting as a single intelligent entity, split into 5 synchronized formations. This initial dispersal was a calculated probe designed to stretch the defensive perimeter thin and force the system to reveal its detection thresholds and response times across a wide geographical area. They flew just 42 meters above the frozen treetops. At this extremely low altitude, the drones were intentionally mixing their signatures with ground clutter, the electronic noise generated by trees, terrain, and buildings. Their engines, whisper quiet, were acoustically masked by the winter wind. They crossed into Russian airspace without a single alarm. The first line of defense, the long-range early warning radars, was effectively blind. Their beams scanned the skies far above, completely missing the threat hugging the contours of the earth beneath them. At 5:33, low-altitude anomalies flickered on the screens of a regional command post. The returns were faint, inconsistent, and well below the standard engagement altitude for hostile aircraft. Initially, they were dismissed as atmospheric clutter or a flock of birds, common false positives in the region. But then, the returns changed speed and direction in unison, a coordinated movement that defied any natural explanation. The realization hit with a jolt. Alarms blared. The order was given. Engage. Fire at will. 32 surface-to-air missiles, each costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, tore through the pre-dawn sky, hunting targets that cost less than a family car. 20 drones were obliterated. The defense network had drawn blood. For a moment, it seemed the defense held. The system had worked as designed, destroying the initial wave. But this was precisely what the swarm's algorithm was waiting for. The swarm adapted. The loss of 20 units was not a failure, it was a data point. The locations of the missile launches had instantly mapped the active defense batteries for the rest of the swarm. The remaining 30 drones split into 3 distinct strike clusters. Each was assigned a primary target and an encrypted, evasive route that navigated through the newly identified gaps in the defensive screen. On the radar screens, chaos erupted. The operators' displays contradicted themselves, showing targets that were fast, then static, then multiplying into ghost images. The swarm was actively confusing the system.
3 targets. No, 8. Correcting. 14. We have lost them.
The drones dropped even lower. At 29 meters, the older S-300 and S-400 series radars, designed for high-altitude threats, lost their ability to achieve a reliable track. Their minimum elevation angle had been breached. At 5:37, Cluster 1, now unopposed, struck its target near Odintsovo. The primary Don-2N radar arrays were destroyed. Their sensitive electronic panels melted into slag. A critical eye watching over Moscow had been blinded. Seconds later, Cluster 2 hit a key communications node at Batutinki. The site went dark, its destruction confirmed not by military sensors, but by civilian seismic stations detecting the shock waves. The shield was beginning to crumble. After months of grinding attrition along a static front, the war had entered a dangerous new phase. Strategic patience had worn thin, replaced by a high-stakes gamble. The objective was no longer just to defend, but to deliver a decisive psychological and operational blow directly to the heart of the Russian Federation. This was a mission born of desperation and audacity, designed to shatter the Kremlin's carefully constructed illusion of invulnerability. At 5:42 a.m., two heavily modified Ukrainian MiG-29s, codenamed White Spear 1 and 2, sliced through the clouds above the sleeping capital. They were phantoms, their airframes treated with radar-absorbent materials, their engines shrouded to minimize their heat signature. They had flown a perilous, low-altitude route, exploiting gaps in radar coverage and using the brutal winter weather as a shield. Below, Moscow glowed faint and orange against the frozen landscape. The city was a sprawling, dormant giant. 12.7 million residents were still wrapped in the fragile illusion of safety, utterly unaware of the specters that had breached their nation's formidable air defenses. Inside the lead cockpit, the pilot known as White Spear 1 finalized his attack coordinates. His heart hammered against his ribs, a stark contrast to the cold, digital precision of his instruments. A final encrypted order crackled through his headset. Execute spiral pattern. No kinetic weapons unless authorized. This was surgical, a decapitation strike aimed at command and control infrastructure. The goal was to disable the central nervous system of the Russian military, not to level a city. White Spear 1 dropped to 1,800 meters, a dangerously low altitude that would minimize the reaction time for any remaining air defenses. His systems screamed confirmation. He locked onto the Western Electronic Warfare Station, a critical node shielding the National Defense Control Center. A single Kh-31P anti-radiation missile roared off its pylon, and the storm swallowed it. It struck dead center. The impact vaporized reinforced steel and concrete, collapsing the underground levels that housed the station's core processors. A pressure wave, a silent herald of the chaos to come, shattered thousands of windows across the district. In an instant, the Western electronic shield was down. A gaping hole had been torn in Moscow's defenses. Seizing the opening, White Spear 2 fired two bunker-busting missiles at the Subterranean Reserve Command Tier 2. The target appeared innocuous from above. A camouflage service node containing fuel depots, redundant data links, and a mobile command bunker designed for continuity of government. The impacts ignited 46,000 liters of jet fuel and ruptured a primary data tunnel. A column of fire and debris spiraled 60 meters into the air, a funeral pyre for Moscow's sense of security. The phantoms had delivered their message. By 6:10 a.m., smoke over the Moskva turned sunlight to copper. Sirens wailed across the capital. The consequences spread like a fracture in glass. A cascading power failure hit 2.3 million residents. For 7 minutes, FSO radios returned only static. Emergency response was in disarray. 2 metro lines stalled, trapping over 1,800 in darkness. Smoke from NDCC tunnels drifted down, fueling panic. Major roads were sealed over structural risk. State TV offered a brief, localized incident, nothing more. Social media told the truth. Plumes, panicked bridges, Dead radios. Messages spread like wildfire. Police logged over 280 crashes. Panic behind the wheel. At 7:04 a.m., as fires still burned along the embankment, the Kremlin went dark. The heart of Russia's command and control apparatus, a system designed to withstand a nuclear war, was rendered deaf, dumb, and blind. 42 seconds was enough. In less than a minute, the digital nervous system of the state had been severed. The city map, normally pulsing with layers of friendly and hostile positions, civilian infrastructure, and air corridors, was a blank white void. Every sensor, every node, every encrypted uplink, offline. The flow of information had not just been disrupted, it had ceased to exist. In the silence that followed, a single panicked voice cut through the static on a battery-powered backup channel. "We do not know if the aircraft have left, or if they are directly above us." The room froze. In that moment of absolute uncertainty, the state's decision-making process fractured. Hardliners, driven by doctrine and fury, demanded immediate retaliatory strikes against pre-approved targets. To them, inaction was an admission of defeat, an invitation for further aggression. But the security chiefs and intelligence analysts warned, firing blind risks catastrophic miscalculation. What if the attack was a feint? What if the real threat was yet to come? Launching missiles without reliable targeting data could strike the wrong country, or worse, trigger an automated response from another nuclear power. The paralysis was total. 11 air defense units, the pride of the nation's capital defense, had failed. Not from cowardice, but from total data loss. Their crews were ready, but their screens were dead. The networks hardened, redundant connections were severed. A $9.4 billion defensive ring, a masterpiece of layered deterrence, had been beaten by low-cost assets exploiting a single point of failure: the data itself. No one stood. No one spoke. The protocols for this scenario simply did not exist. The argument between action and inaction raged, but with no information, it was an argument in a vacuum. A new line was being drawn on the map of modern warfare, and for the first time in a generation, it did not favor Moscow. First, you do not have to destroy air defenses, you blind them. Disable radar and communication nodes. Hardware becomes useless steel. Second, small, cheap tools can deliver strategic effects. Accessible tech and tactics rewrite the balance of power. Third, precision beats brute force. 4 missiles, 3 key nodes, cascading collapse. We are not stronger than Russia, but we can surpass Russia in thinking. Operation Basilfall did not end the war, but it ended an illusion. Will nations pivot to swarms and stealth mods? And can defenses adapt in time? Even fortified capitals are vulnerable. The future will be defined by who thinks faster.